When I used to live on the Upper West Side of Manhattan, I went to any Upper West Side Jewish working mom PR girl's version of church. Soul Cycle on 92nd Street. It was my holy, soulful dose of spirituality meets sweat. An hour to pedal on a bike to nowhere and everywhere all at once. Each pedal bringing me closer to God, or at least a sample size. Anyway, I went almost daily, attending the 6 a.m. class affectionately deemed the Rooster, as in waking up the city like a rooster. Get it? One day, post-Rooster, I meandered into the locker room and, as often happens at that particular Upper West Side location, I saw a familiar face, a celebrity, fixing her hair in the shared mirror. I immediately recognized her. It was Alysia Reiner, who at the time was on the show Orange is the New Black.
You wearing sweatpants?
They're slacks.
All right, you gotta breathe. Hey. Hey, take a deep breath. Yeah, come on.
Jason.
Joe, I'm Joe.
No, my husband is Jason.
What happened to him? You get arrested?
No. He's having an affair with a man named Gavin.
I don't have time to watch a lot of TV, but I knew that show because I'm friends with Taryn Manning. Taryn played a character named Pensatucky, while Alysia played the warden, Natalie Figueroa, a role for which she won a Screen Actors Guild Award. We chit-chatted, and she was incredibly friendly and generous with her time, and I immediately liked her. But like many New York City fleeting relationships, she grabbed a smoothie, I did my hair, and we both disappeared down Broadway. And because that Soul Cycle location unfortunately shuttered after the COVID lockdown, I thought I'd never see her again. So, imagine my surprise. About 5 years later, when my manager, Blair, the wonderful human who helped me navigate my keynote speaking career, tells me on the phone one day, "Hey, funny story. I have this new client. She's not just a speaker. She's also an actor. Hey, she was on Orange is the New Black. Ever heard of her?" And thus, our paths were gently pushed back together again. One pandemic, a nationally acclaimed TV show, and a few keynote speaking stages later. Through Blair. I love how life has a way of throwing fun little curveballs that are just so surprising, delicious, and delightful. This was one of them. And, gratitudeologist that I am, I immediately gobbled it up and connected with Alysia, asking her to come on this show and tell me more of her story. I don't think I was even close to prepared for what I was about to hear. And believe me, you may not be either. This is one dynamic lady. So today, when I say buckle your seatbelt, I mean pull it tight, make a knot, and tie it in a bow. Because Alysia Reiner is one of the most unique, complex, incredible, intentional, gratitude-driven, selfless, humanitarian type of humans I've ever had the pleasure of sitting across from. And we've got her here with us today on the Gratitudeology Podcast.
Will you walk through the fire? Would you ride through the storm? Will you walk on a wire? Will you save me if I fall? Will you break through the madness? Set us down where we're safe. I'll be right here waiting till you find me again.
When we finally got Alysia into the studio, we did our usual equipment checks while Alysia and I took off our shoes, settled Indian style on our chairs, that comfy crunchy lotus position that's the adult version of crisscross applesauce. We faced each other and got to reconnecting. But what made it just a bit more magical was this. She came in with glitter freckles applied all across her gorgeous face. Alysia Reiner, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
You and I first met in the locker room at Soul Cycle.
I know.
The 92nd Street Soul Cycle, which sadly did not make it through COVID.
I'm so sad.
So sad. But Soul Cycle is like the great, like, bringer together of people.
100%. It's so funny you said that because I was just this week, shout out to Jolie Hunt, who had like a fun like party ride. And all of these people who I didn't know, like we didn't know we all knew each other were there. And it was such a lovely like way to all connect.
What I've always loved about Soul Cycle is it's really about kind of taking control and not judging people's bodies and just owning that moment and really getting like in touch. And I feel like you embodied that energy of just kind of owning your energy, your space. I also loved reading the story that a casting director told you not to change your nose. Is that correct? Because you have such a beautiful, unique aesthetic. Like you are so you. Alysia is one of those unique celebrities who embraces herself fully. Not the generic Hollywood screen queen who succumbs to every run-of-the-mill beauty standard and has the same carbon copy plastic surgery from the same carbon copy doctor that everyone uses in Beverly Hills. No, Alysia has always marched to the beat of her own drum, though it hasn't always been easy.
It's so funny, like, to me, I'm like, oh, no. I was told by many people to get a nose job early.
Was there somebody who told you not to?
Peter Weir, the director, Peter Weir. When I was in high school, I auditioned for, I think it was Dead Poets Society.
Yes, that's what I have in my notes.
And I did my audition, and I'm going to butcher his British accent, but he was like, right, so I'm going to tell you right now, I'm not going to hire you because you're in high school, but you look like you're like 30. So there's no way I can cast you in this. But you did an excellent job and you really are quite good at this. And may I give you some advice? And I was like, oh, okay. And he's like, never get a nose job. He's like, you have a beautiful nose. There are a few angles that it doesn't look good, but a good cinematographer can handle that. And I was like, oh, okay. I love the honesty with which he handled it. And I really held on to that. And there were so many days I cried and was like, maybe I should, and to this day, it's like you see so many actors getting so much work done. And it's like, every single day, not every single day, but there's that question of like, oh, is now the time? Is now the time that I should start doing the things? Instead, I just put glitter freckles on.
It's so indicative of the energy that just percolates under the surface with you. And because Alysia is just a supporter of everyone around her, she shared with me that the glitter freckles on her face were made by the daughter of her dentist, by the way. Go ahead and check out our BTS pic on our Instagram at Gratitudeology to see her glittered up look. And if you're interested in purchasing the glitter freckles for yourself, maybe just in time for festival season, I'll link them in the show notes. Anyway, so to be a consistently working star of both big and small screen, but somehow keep your authenticity, I mean, how did she get here? Well, to find the whole story, we've got to go back to the very beginning. I know your childhood, similar to mine, kind of started rife with insecurities and being teased for your weight. And I think that's like, it's funny because like we all have that. It's such a common female narrative.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about what that was like.
I don't think about it all that much anymore. I remember being like embarrassed by my body and feeling like it just was too big. And it's now when I think about it, it's interesting to think about feeling too big on this planet as a woman, like what that means to feel too big. And I always like to go deeper. And I think really I felt like my feelings were too big.
That's interesting.
who I was too big.
Yeah.
And then I did the thing that, you know, so many young girls do of really trying to control my body in the most deeply unhealthy, horrible ways. I think also when I was 8, my parents got divorced, and I learned that I should have no needs, because if I needed anything, it meant a fight between my parents. You know, if I needed new clothes, if I need, like, they would fight over my, everything from my tuition to like new clothes. So that was also part of the eating disorder of like, I don't need food. Like, how little can I need? And for me, it was very much like, I always say I was a failed anorexic, you know. I could never be bulimic. I would do diet pills and laxatives. I like to say this because nobody likes to talk about it. I would chew and spit out. You know, I would do anything to try and be skinny. And then, thank God, I found recovery in my teens. And I think it's, as we were talking about earlier, it's a lifelong process of freeing yourself from that like patriarchal, you need to be in that tiny, tiny body, perfectionistic fantasy.
I think it's hard for people of our age, people that are like older millennials, Gen X, and slightly older, because now we live in this time where everything's supposed to be like acceptance and body positivity, but we still are programmed that, you know, like Paris Hilton and Christina Aguilera circa 1999 with the like jeans on the hip bones was the right thing to do, the Tara Reid of it all.
And similar to gratitude, I think for me, it's my job in this body to daily deprogram myself. And that only comes from practicing that. You know, even in recovery for years, I was like so afraid of nuts and avocado. Like I was so afraid of fat, even in years of recovery. And now I eat like at least an avocado a day. And guess what? It didn't change my weight at all. It's daily challenging the lies in my head. Like that's the game I love to play about everything, is questioning my thoughts. Are they true? Or do I just think them? You know, have they been programmed into me? And how do I make sure that I am taking action on thoughts I actually believe and want to manifest?
I'm wondering how that impacted where you kind of went next. Because I know you were at Vassar, British American Drama Academy, National Theatre Institute. Like you went like straight through the theatrical pipeline.
Well, it's funny you say that. So I knew I wanted to be an actress from the time I was very young. My parents were like, absolutely not. You need like the money job. And you can't start young. They really felt strongly. And I deeply appreciate this now, that you need life to pretend to be other people. So I started training when I was like 12 or 13 in the city. I went to HB studios. I did Circle in the Square studios. I worked with a lot of incredible, private people. And then I was actually a biopsych major at Vassar.
I read that.
Yeah,
that
I wrote
crazy.
my college essays about how psychoneurobiology and acting were really the same thing, which I still believe. Like I'm still in the podcasts that I listen to, they're mostly like neuroscience. Like I'm such a science geek. And then I overloaded my courses so I could take a year abroad when I was in school doing BADA and doing the National Theatre Institute. And that year I also found out I had a tumor. It's one of the things I'm the most grateful for on the planet. I had a week of not knowing whether I had cancer. I don't. Thank you, God. It's what's called a cold nodule. They had me on Synthroid for a little while, and then they took me off, and then they keep on learning more about it. But bottom line, it doesn't move. It's not hormonally active at all. So it's just it's like a cyst, basically. But that week changed my life because I was like, oh, I really want to try this thing. Like, I could die tomorrow. I really want to go be an actress. And I was with a boy at the time, and he didn't show up. And that changed my life because I may have married him otherwise, you know? I met David shortly after that. So I am so grateful for my little tumor because it really led me towards the best things in my life, which are like, I'm living my dream as an artist. And I now, many, many years, 2 decades later, am with the same dude and love him.
That's so incredible. So how did you guys meet?
Doing Shakespeare in Vermont when I was still in school. Yeah. You know, I got my equity card doing Shakespeare in Vermont, and it was like the most heavenly, amazing summer. And I fell madly in love with this dude, and we had sex on the roof of the car. And it was, you know, and I wouldn't admit I loved him. I thought it was just like a hot summer thing. And then, you know, I went to visit my my best friend who's Swiss, and she was living in Switzerland, and I got off the plane and she's like, "You're in love." And I'm like, "No, I'm not, you're wrong." But then I moved to New York when I graduated, and we started like dating for real and ended up moving in together. There was so much magic to have a partner like I did. And that was really interesting because he was an extraordinary partner who had such outrageous belief in me, and yet I didn't believe in myself. And I would get so angry at him, not really, but like, because I thought he was lying to me when he would be like, "I see it for you." And I'm like, "No, you're lying," because I couldn't see it for myself, but he could always see it for me. And that was such a magical gift. I would say about the work stuff, it was really hard. And now I look back at that little 20-year-old, 21-year-old, and I'm like, oh, baby girl, it wasn't actually that hard, but it felt so hard because I had a really tough time getting an agent. I had a really tough time getting work the first 5 years. I would say I got my first big break was I did a TV pilot. I think I turned 27 in London, doing my first series regular in a TV pilot, and then my pilot didn't go, and it was so painful. Like that, pain is a touchstone to growth, they say.
How did you not crumble, and how did it make you stronger?
I learned a couple of lessons. A big one is that first of all, you can't see it as rejection. A big one is like, oh, no. It's you, I get an opportunity to act. And that's all it is I get to do this scene the way I love to do it, and then to shed it and let it go. Mm-hmm. And additionally, to trust that the right people will see and find you in the right time. That takes a lot of faith, as it were, and faith without works is dead. So it's a lot of taking action. You have to show up at those auditions. You have to show up in enormous ways. You go to cattle calls, finding an agent, back in the day, I don't know if people still do that. I did mailings and mailings and mailings. I would ask, my first manager was my stepsister's boyfriend's friend of friend, that. That's how it happened. And you just keep on keeping on.
It was then I realized that, I just always thought of Alysia as having this amazing career. She's been famous for a gazillion years. So hearing about her stories as a struggling actress, it seemed like I was talking to a different Alysia. But of course, the beautiful reality is that without struggling actress Alysia, we wouldn't have the wonderful, successful Alysia of today. And most of the world probably first caught that version of Alysia in Sideways, that 2004 art house blockbuster about a road trip to wine country that probably did a considerable amount more for wine tasting than it did for the already tricky dynamics between men and women. If you've seen the film, you know what I mean. And if you recall, it earned so many nominations and awards that honestly, I don't think I can even count them all.
Definitely Sideways, that was a life changer, being in a Academy Award nominated, Golden Globe winning, that was a life changer. And going to the Golden Globe, that was my first time going to an awards show and feeling like a fairy princess. But most importantly, it did open some doors that then I did a bunch of off-Broadway. And, I always like to say, you never know who's going to see you and how they're going to see you. And you just keep on showing up and showing up for the art. And for me, I feel so grateful to have been part of so many beautiful stories and such exquisite storytelling. It never for me was about the red carpets. They're fun, the awards are fun, but the truth is you get that award and then you have to get a job the next day. If you're not Nicole Kidman, bless her, working every single day of every week, there's some downtime, and feeling esteemable and valuable during the downtime is a part of the gig.
But she had no idea that cancer would once again intrude on her life in a way that would push her to realize the important things and finally give her the courage to take ownership of her own narrative.
My dad died quite suddenly. My dad was 55. He had cancer. He was gone in 10 days, and I was 30. And I didn't have, the success that I have now. And it was the worst thing that ever happened to me, by far. And in that framework of gratitude, it taught me and grew me in such extraordinary and spectacular ways, including it was the impetus to create my own work. And that was the first time I was shocked by people's inability to talk about grief and aging. I think our society is so deeply afraid of mortality and aging. And I felt like I had to make art about it. So I made a short film about it. I had a dream of this idea, and then hired a writer and hired a director, and I worked with cancer support community, and we created a discussion guide with 10 social workers and grief counselors.
If you or someone you love has gone through cancer, you might have the same experience as the rest of us. There was everything before you found out, and then everything after. Life is just completely different, totally. And there's nothing you can do to change it back. But what really matters is what you do with the life that's been changed. And for Alysia, it was using her voice and her platform to make something that could help others.
And now the film is used in hospitals and hospices and cancer support communities all over the country. And I've talked to so many people who have been moved by this piece. And it's funny, just today, I got a random email from a friend of a friend who said, my wife was at the Westport Library last night, and a gentleman was speaking about this book that he had just written about the tragic loss of his son and how he got over it. And as part of his presentation, he had a quote of mine about grief on and he sent me this photo, and it's this huge quote of mine on on the screen above him. And I was so moved by that. Like, when our pain can help others, when we can use our pain, when we can use the icky things that happen to us and be honest about them to help heal others, like, that's what it's all about. And when you can tell stories that help evolve culture, like, that's what it's all about. When you think about how people see incarceration, or how people see undocumented people, how people see trans people in the LGBTQ plus community, that show really helped open people's eyes and have more compassion, which is really why I do what I do.
And many of those themes are exactly what Alysia was able to tackle and be a part of when she entered the world of the acclaimed series, Orange is the New Black.
You never know anything's going to be big. Like, that's the real truth of anything. Even if, it is star-studded and billions of dollars are being poured into it, it can flop. Like, I don't want to trash talk any movies, but this year there have been some movies that were made for hundreds of millions of dollars and didn't do well and have every star on the planet in them. So you just never know. I first auditioned to play Laura Prepon's role of Alex, and I didn't get it. And I was heartbroken because it was the best script I'd read in so long. And I met Genji in the audition, and she was so awesome. And I was like, wow. And then I auditioned to play her best friend, Polly, I think it is. And I didn't get that. And then they offered me this like 3-line role of the executive assistant. And I was like, yes. And I, being who I am, I love the research. So I interviewed a bunch of actual, people who work in prisons, be actual wardens, and I visited prisons. It was really interesting interviewing these wardens. They were mostly men. I found one woman. They didn't they didn't want to talk about it a lot. It's funny, right now I'm playing Secret Service, and similarly, like, they don't like to talk about themselves. You have to like really pull it out of them. I definitely asked about the day-to-day, but like, why did you choose to do this? What's rewarding about your job? What do you love most about your job? What do you hate most about your job? That kind of stuff. That's the fun of what we do, is learning a whole different world, and you learn a whole different language. No matter, even if it's just English, you're learning the language. Secret Service has its own language. The military has its own language. Obviously prison has its own language. Yeah. And that's the fun of it, I'm a deeply curious person. I want to stay as curious as possible for the rest of my life, because I do think it keeps you young, staying in the I don't know and I wonder. And that's what I love what I do. And the more I can be in a new world, the more joyful and delicious it is. They wrote such a spectacular arc and journey over the 7 years. And that was the biggest gift on the planet. And I've never actually asked Genji about this, but, in the end, you just saw this softer side to Fig. She was just a badass bitch in the beginning. And I don't know if they would have written that no matter what, or if my mushiness and my, but you never know, I guess.
And once again, Alysia would find ways to leverage what she had into helping others.
While I was doing Orange, that's when I really was like, oh, I have a platform. This is where I'm, before Orange, I always knew that there was like deep inequity. And I didn't know the exact statistics, but I have my friends, Eric Jensen and Jessica Blank, did a play called Exonerated that I saw and was very it was also made into a film and really changed how I saw incarceration. And I have no personal experience. And then I got this job and I was like, oh, I am being called to tell story about this. And how can I use that? And how can I use that platform to be of service in that way? So that's when I started working with the Women's Prison Association. That's when I started working with a lot of other amazing organizations. There's one called REDF, which is a foundation that gives grants to formerly incarcerated people. It's like social entrepreneurship, which I'm super interested in. And I started doing a lot of volunteer work, and uplifting of stories around incarceration and around undocumented people too, because, first of all, because it was the Trump era, but also because that's where the story took us. And if we're going to talk about the industrial prison complex and we're going to talk about ICE, why not really go there and talk about it in the real life as in addition to the storytelling of the television show. So I don't have the exact statistics, but what I can tell you is in the past 50 years, the amount of women incarcerated went up like 733% was the last statistic I read. And I don't believe that that's because women are being more bad. I think it's that we, as we well know, incarceration is really modernized slavery. Like, let's call it what it is. And I have a friend who started the Bronx Defenders and then looked at these statistics and said, this is insane, and saw that in Tulsa, Oklahoma, those statistics are even worse. So she said, I'm going to go down to Tulsa, Oklahoma and start an organization called Still She Rise and bring lawyers down there and see how we can help these women. Because there's also the difference between jail and prison. Jail is like when you get arrested and you haven't been sentenced yet, but you can spend years in jail. And a perfect example of like the horror of what we're doing to women and humans on this planet in this country is, let's say a woman has multiple children, and now we won't even go into the abortion issue, has multiple children, is trying to feed her kids, is trying to like stay above poverty line, has multiple jobs. And let's say between her jobs, she's driving, she can't find a parking spot. She doesn't want to be late for work because she doesn't want to get fired. She parks someplace she really shouldn't park. She gets a ticket. She can't afford that ticket. It's like, do I buy groceries for my family that week or do I pay the ticket? Guess what? She gets a couple tickets. She gets arrested. Now she may lose her children for a couple of parking tickets. She ends up in jail for a couple of parking tickets that she got just for trying to take care of her family. Is that fair to you? Is that equal? Is that just? Like, that's a true story and the definition of the system. So many women who are incarcerated are being blamed for their partner's crime. Like that happens an extraordinary amount of time. There are so many unjust stories to our justice system. And I'm really interested in how do we make it as just as possible. When I was a little girl, and I still really, really, really believe this, like I I don't know that I never understood prison. You know, I was that girl who was like, I can't remember what book it was, but I remember reading a book as like a very young human of like, when someone does something wrong, and there are tribes on this planet that do this of like, you love on the person and you like, if someone steals, you give them the thing and say, it's okay. You don't have to steal this. My kid went to this school called the Barnard Toddler Center. And I love this school so much. Shout out to Tova. Because what they did was they would have multiple of every single toy. And if kids were fighting over a toy, someone would come over and bring a second version of that exact toy. And they would say, there's always enough at the Barnard Toddler Center. And we still say that to each other in our household all the time. Because I do feel in this society, we are taught that there isn't enough. And we all feel it. And I can't even imagine what it feels like when there really isn't enough.
Speaking of not enough, although audiences still couldn't get enough, after running for a total of 91 amazing episodes and getting a gazillion awards, Orange is the New Black ended in 2019. Alysia was deep in the thick of plotting what was next for her. The typical rigmarole of auditions continued. She'd work, then have some time off, then work again. And then, just as things felt like they were kind of ramping up again.
Now to growing concerns about the deadly coronavirus officially hitting the U.S. Here's what we know. A Washington State resident
there
fell
were
ill
three
after
types of
returning
people
from Wuhan,
during
China,
COVID.
where the outbreak
First,
began.
the frontline workers and folks who had to go to work every day. And bless you, if that is you. Gratitude doesn't even begin to describe it. Then, the rest of us fell into one of two categories. First, those who stayed home and felt stuck, bored, and trapped in TikTok land. And then those who insisted they used this once-in-a-lifetime, forced downtime opportunity to do something new, unique, and productive. Alysia, unsurprisingly, fell into that category, but it wasn't baking sourdough or banana bread that sparked her interest. No. She took up a slightly different new pursuit. Alysia, ever the helper, became a volunteer firefighter. Yep, you heard that right. A volunteer firefighter.
During COVID, we were very, very, very fortunate that we had someplace to go, privileged, one could say, and we lived in Fire Island. And where we lived in Fire Island, there's no cars, no hospital, no doctor during, off season. And all there is volunteer fire. And I felt so grateful to that place for saving my life and my family's life, physically, emotionally, and spiritually, that I really wanted to give back to that community. And I knew a little bit about the volunteer fire department there. I knew that they had fire trucks. And our little town is called Saltaire, and they're we don't have a restaurant really. We just have a store, a library, a summer camp during the summer, but there's no, a ball field, a post office, and a firehouse. Mm-hmm. And I was like, I think I want to join volunteer fire and be of service, give back to this community. Mm-hmm. Not really knowing, definitely not knowing that to be volunteer fire, you have to train the same way as FDNY. Every firefighter in America has to train the same way. So I did the training, and it was one of the hardest, scariest things I've done in my entire life by far. You definitely learn a whole new language there. It was funny. I was walking to the gym this morning, and I passed by a firehouse, and they were it was open because they were testing their saws, and I giggled to myself because I knew exactly what they were doing. And if a little kid, if a regular mom was walking by that firehouse, to be like, why are they turning on the chainsaws? Like what? But I knew exactly what they were doing, because you have to check that your chainsaws are working, and you use chainsaws if you can't get in, like there are a couple of reasons you use chainsaws on a regular basis. And by the way, saws are the thing I hate the most about fire service. Like I'm still scared of that. They're so scary.
Were there fires while you were out there?
I've been to a couple of fires so far. A lot of what we do is drive the ambulance. So I got EVOC trained, which is emergency vehicle trained, so I can drive. I'm not an EMT. I'm not a paramedic. I don't love blood.
Yeah.
But I can drive the ambulance, which can be life-saving because when there's a medical emergency out there, you can't wait for the ferry.
Totally.
So the ambulance is a really important tool for us.
I've really always believed that the easiest way to connect to gratitude, no matter where you are in your experience, is just to turn around and help somebody else. And if you ever want to see a life lived in gratitude by being of service, Alysia embodies it. From being an activist for legal reform and helping the wrongfully incarcerated, to real-life volunteer firefighter and ambulance driver, in this crazy world we're all in right now, we sure could use a lot more Alysias running around. Don't you think? So, with all this benevolence, I figured in a world on fire, maybe Alysia would have some ideas on how we can all cope.
I have no fucking clue. No, but all I know is what works for me, right? That's all any of us know. So what I have learned is a couple of things. One is just that back to the curiosity. We have no clue what's going to happen. And one of my favorite expressions is it all works out in the end. And if it hasn't worked out, it's not the end. And that is so freaking Pollyanna and optimistic in this moment. But what I do believe is whatever's going to happen, like things are going to break. Things are breaking. Systems are breaking. The systems were broken to begin with, and now they're breaking in a whole different way. And it's my hope that we're all, and by all I mean all, able to see the brokenness and together put it back together in a better way. I don't know if that's possible. I really don't. I've taken this time to stay curious. And as you said, like stay in my hula hoop. For me, that is firefighting. Like if the world's a dumpster fire, I'm going to learn how to put out fires. I love firefighting so much because it makes me I know that I am being part of solution. It's the same as I became a foster mom when the minute Trump said kids in cages, and it took a lot of years because becoming a foster mom is actually like there's a lot of red tape. There's a lot of classes you have to do. There's a lot of stuff. And again, over COVID, I had the time to do that. So like those were my two big things of COVID. And I love fostering.
So how does that
and
work?
It's deeply imperfect, like it's an imperfect system, but I do emergency fosters, or me and my husband do emergency fosters. So it's respite. It's like, let's say there's a baby and they need someone immediately. We do shorter term as they're going into the system. Or let's say a foster mom has to have a surgery or has an emergency. They have to go to a funeral. We'll take the baby for a couple weeks. So I only bring that up to say I love fostering because the way I see it is like, if this small human experiences our home and our love and feels deeply loved for however long they're with us, it's my dream that they feel that cellularly and hold on to that and remember that. And that's my that might be a perfectionistic fantasy, but that's how I really see it, is like they will have that memory of that unconditional love by a stranger. Like we invite babies into our home, our children into our home that are strangers, and we just love on them. And if we could do that more on this planet, I think we'd all be in better shape. I feel deeply about service and community. And I do believe that is, and I might write a book about it, that is what could save our society right now, is true service and community.
I can't think of a better place to wrap this up because that's the message that's the hanger I'm going to hang all of the rest of this off of, is that framework. That's your gift. That's your message to give to people. And it's very deep and special. And I just appreciate you.
Oh, I appreciate you. I love all the gratitude that you bring to the world, all the light you bring to the world.
Alysia, we're so grateful for you with all your glitter. To follow Alicia's pursuits, you can find her on Instagram at Alysia Reiner. That's all for today. Remember, if you like what you heard, if it impacted you in any way, and if you think it's a message other people in your life might like to hear, I'd be so grateful if you'd give me 5 stars, leave a quick little comment. Those things really help. And share this podcast with your friends, either on social media or just word of mouth. I'm on a mission for us all to help each other focus on expanding our attention towards what's good in the world rather than focusing on what's bad, one person at a time. If we all did that, even to our own little sphere of influence, the world has the potential to be a much more radically awesome place. Stick with me, friends. I've got your back. We're in this together, and it's a great day to see the greatness in the day. See you next time. The Gratitudeology Podcast is written, executive produced, and hosted by me, Jamie Hess. Sound design and studio production by Gotham Production Studios. Our theme song is Maze by Hills, sung by Nadia Ali. And don't forget to follow us on Instagram at Gratitudeology.
Will you break through the madness? Set us down where we're safe. I'll be right here.